Welcome to another edition of Danny's Hot Takes, sponsored by Mob Rules.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Glad to see you divesting yourself from us.
Not just, well, you know, I don't want to take full credit. I mean, you do some stuff.
Fair.
So I'm Danny, and with me today I've got John.
Hello.
And today we'll be going over the new chapter approved mission pack tactical deployment. And so normally when we do these book reviews, we're doing a review of the entire book, but we're probably not going to do that today. We're just going to go over what the new stuff is.
Pretty much, because these mission packs here is kind of following the format of the Grand Tournament packet, where
Correct.
There's a lot of reprint.
Yep. So basically, this is a great rule book if you're going to go to a tactical deployment event where they're going to be using these new terrain rules and this kind of new way to play, because it also just has the main rule book in it, as well as the glossary, the rare rules, all that stuff is all reprinted in this book as well. So you don't have to bring along a separate rule book with this, just this one book, which is kind of nice. I do like that. So we'll just get started. Let's just start talking about this. So in a nutshell, what this is, and Games Workshop has previewed this a little bit. What they're doing is they're taking the main kind of competitive match play rules, and they're adding a little twist to it by allowing you to buy terrain for your army along with your army list.
So, I mean, terrain's being described as the third army forever.
Oh, totally.
And at this point in this book, it literally is the third army.
Now it's like your army plus a half, and then your opponent has the other half of said army, so you guys kind of share and make a new army. It's love, baby.
That is.
All right. So the very first section kind of takes you through how to set up your tactical deployment game. So you select a battle size, same thing. You got combat patrol, you've got incursion, strike force, onslaught, and they give you a points limit for those as well as your starting command point in the muster army section of the rules. So the new twist comes in a couple of areas. And the first of these is the step 3, gather tactical terrain.
Perfectly.
So, yeah, hunt and gather your tactical terrain into a pile and bring it with you to a tournament.
Don't buy it.
just find a wild one.
Gather it.
Yeah, lasso it up, hog tie it, bring it with you to a tournament.
Like a nerd store ghillie suit where you're just covered in magic cards and boxes and you just kind of gather their terrain.
Oh, man. Fantastic. You totally won't get kicked out of a hobby shop for dressing like that and taking things off the shelves and putting them in your pockets. All right. So, yeah, we're in a great mood tonight, by the way. All right. So, the minimum number of terrain data sheets depends on the points level of the game or the size of the game that you're playing. So, like a typical Strike Force game, which is what you'd normally see, is a 2,000 point game. You have to have a minimum of 4 pieces of terrain. And you can only duplicate those 3 times. So it's got kind of the rule of 3 built into those.
So you can't just take like 18,000 craters and put them in front of your gun.
Yeah. So depending on how many craters come in each data sheet, like you might be able to take 18 craters, but I don't know how many craters come in each like sheet. Anyway, some terrain features will have the critical terrain feature keyword. And so those terrain features are only allowed to bring one of in your army for a 2,000 point game. Once you get up to the onslaught size or the 3,000 point game, you can double up on those if you so desire. And since each terrain like feature or features is going to have like a point cost associated with it, you have to spend at least 150 points on terrain, but no more than 200 points. So you can't just say, I'm not bringing terrain to this game. Like, that's not something that you can do. Like, I'm a Knights player. I play on an open field, playing a bowling ball all the way. Get the F out.
Sounds like some of our 6th edition Tau organizers.
Oh, what do you mean? What do you mean I can't set up a billboard exactly the same size as a riptide on my side of the table that I can jump behind? Anyway, and you'll make a roster just like you would with your army roster. And once you finish gathering your tactical terrain, it specifically tells you share your army roster and your terrain roster with your opponent. Mm-hmm. And they have an example of the terrain roster right here in the Warhammer 40,000 tactical terrain roster. Copyright 2020. And so then you would normally determine mission, just like you would expect to. This mission set only has 3 for both the combat patrol and onslaught size games, and then 6 for incursion and strike force missions. So the GT pack has 9 missions, so it has a few more missions than this does. But these are all brand new missions with new rules. Right. So we'll be going over those as well. Maybe not all of them, but I think we're going to go through the Strike Force ones for sure.
The ones that will most likely be used.
I think those are the ones that people are going to see the most of. So you do the same thing. You read the mission briefing, you create the battlefield, you place objective markers, and then you determine attacker and defender. And so this is important in that you determine attacker, defender, and who has what table side before you place terrain. So this is key. And so step 10 is the other new step. And that step is set up the tactical terrain. So this section is quite expansive. It's probably one of the biggest sections in any of the rules. So because it kind of has to detail like a new way to play the game and very different way to play the game. So the attacker places the first piece of terrain, and then you alternate. You have to place your most expensive piece of terrain first. And basically what there are these terrain nodes on every table. So on these terrain nodes, you have to put your piece of terrain wholly within 9 inches of that terrain node. So you can't push them out super far, you can't push them back super far, but you can kind of play around with them. Especially if it's a larger piece of terrain, it's going to be fairly hard to get it outside of 9 inches.
Right, and you can't necessarily castle yourself in the corner surrounded by terrain. Or
correct.
Right.
Yep, which is great. But since this is on your table side, if your opponent decides, I'm not bringing like a bunch of line of sight blocking terrain for my opponent to hide behind, you can say, okay, cool. Well, my army needs that stuff to survive. So now I can make sure every single game that I have a piece of line of sight blocking terrain in my on my backfield that I can put some important units behind and hide them. So I think that's a really great tool. So the terrain features also have to be wholly set up in your territory. And some of the terrain features also have to be placed on objective markers. So, and they have some special rules, like area terrain can't go, as if it's multi-story area terrain, you can't put them on the second level. It has to go on the bottom level, or if it's a hill, you have to put it on top of the hill after you place the piece of terrain. So it has to be on the ground more or less. You can't place terrain features within 3 inches of the board edge, and you can't place them within 3 inches of each other. If you can't set up a terrain feature because there's not enough room on the table, you don't get to put it down. And so once you fill up the different terrain nodes that you have on your half of the table, then you can place terrain kind of where you want to, adhering to that 3-inch kind of separation. Then you do your normal stuff, select secondaries, declare reserves and transports, deploy armies, and then roll for first turn just like you would normally would. So all of that is the same. Some missions or secondaries require you to control terrain features. So they have a special call out for that, how to control terrain features. So as long as you're close to it, if it's an obstacle, you count as so the most models within 3 inches of it or whatever. It's controlled and is exactly the same as an objective marker. However, if the terrain piece is a piece of area terrain, the models have to be wholly within the terrain piece to count for scoring. So if a critical objective marker, or like not a critical, but like a terrain feature that has to be controlled is obscuring, if you put guys on it, they can shoot you.
Nice.
So I think that's a nice balance there. That kind of helps people from hiding on an objective, like in their deployment zone or whatever, and not moving. Anyway, the next section kind of details what a tactical terrain data sheet looks like. So the storage vein is one that we did preview on the 40K on the Warhammer community.
Yep.
And so this one is not new. It kind of goes through like what it is, what the front of the sheet looks like, what the back of the sheet looks like. But one thing this book didn't come with, and this is probably my biggest criticism of it, is we don't have any of the data sheets available to us.
Yeah, so all the data sheets are a separate purchase. They come bundled together, sort of like the AOS data cards or Army roster cards.
And so I don't know if they're going to release these separately or they're going to release them as a download. I'm not sure like what the release schedule is for these, but it makes it a little bit hard to kind of figure out what you would typically see in an army without seeing that stuff.
I believe they're up for pre-order today as well.
Yeah, that sounds correct. Yes. Yeah. So, I would hope that they're available for people to download, just because people already have purchased terrain and stuff like that, and I think that would make this format a lot more accessible.
Yeah, I definitely hope there's like pictures or expected layouts, and not just kind of throwing Latinish names.
So one of the great things about these cards is they do show you exactly what the the footprint of the building is, right? So what you count as like how it should be set up, like what the footprint is, like everything like that. So for people that have been kind of complaining, like, hey, like this, like the terrain rules are a little vague. Like I wish that I didn't have to talk with my opponent all the time about what, like
The worst part of a social game is talking to your opponent.
Dude, that guy's a jerk. I don't want to talk to him. But this kind of helps to kind of streamline that and make sure that it's not like a debate that you have to have with your opponent potentially at the start of the game. I mean, first of all, I hope you don't have to have a debate with your opponent about this kind of stuff, but it does come to that, and sometimes it's a dice off, and sometimes that dice off doesn't go your way. This way, everything is cement that has rules. It's crystal clear. I think that in general, like this is a really good step for the game.
Right.
I don't know that this is the final step, but I think this is a good start.
For sure.
And so after that, this one pager here, we go into the terrain features, and so this is just a reprint of the normal rules. So we can kind of skip past that. Same terrain traits, everything like that is the same. And then some common terrain features and what those look like and what keywords are associated with them.
And again, this is from the core rulebook.
Correct.
As well.
It's from the core rulebook. Yep. Now, secondary objectives did change a little bit, kind of like the GT pack, where they printed a few extra objectives. And they clarified some ones that were a little unbalanced. Like, for instance, Titan Slayer was a little, or Titan Hunter was a little unbalanced, where like if you killed 2 of them, you got 15 points, which was like, and if you killed 1, you got like 12. It's like, come on. They have done, so these ones are the same ones as in the GT pack. So you've got Engaged in All Fronts, Line Breaker, Dominion, but then each category has one extra one that's new. So, for instance, Outright Dominion is score 3 points at the end of the battle for each critical terrain feature you control, which is great. This is an end of game kind of scoring,
right,
which is not something that's really viable. And an army that goes second really wants to see something like this.
Right.
So if your opponent has brought several critical terrain features, like if you can control those all at the end of the game, that's huge.
And there's not a lot of endgame secondaries right now.
Correct.
And like a lot of people are winning games with like 1 or 2 models left on the table.
Right.
So this is really a nice thing to see.
So yeah, like it can potentially preserve for like push for a more conservative gameplay, which I think is good. And a little bit more tactical, which I quite like. Then you have Targeted Destruction. Score 4 victory points at the end of a battle round for each enemy unit that was destroyed. That battle round that was within 3 inches of a critical terrain feature. So if your opponent is guarding his critical terrain features, and I imagine, because again, like I don't know the rules for these, so I imagine the critical terrain features based on the one data sheet we have seen, or the couple of them that we have seen, they have great rules and great benefits. So you're going to want to be on critical terrain features because they're going to give you something cool. Like the one that lets you repair vehicles that they previewed. The other one, this ammo one, lets you throw extra grenades, which is really good for a lot of armies. Like
Large fan of that one.
Yeah, John already has that one like pre-ordered, I think. Let's see here. And then Purge the Enemy gets Strongholds and Nile, which is score 5 victory points at the end of the battle for each enemy building that was destroyed. So if your opponent, I assume that this means that maybe fortifications count in your terrain data sheet, so you can blow up the buildings, which is super cool. I think that's potentially a great way to include some of the more like the older pieces of terrain.
Sure.
And fortifications. Let's see here. Then you have plant demolition charges for shadow operations, which are the action secondaries. And this is you can do the action. 1 infantry unit in your army can start to perform this action at the end of your movement phase if it is wholly within your opponent's territory and within 1 inch of an obstacle or area terrain feature that does not already have explosives planted on it. This action is completed at the end of your next command phase, provided the unit attempting it is still within 1 inch of the same terrain feature. If this action is successfully completed, that terrain feature is said to have explosives planted on it, and you get 4 victory points at the end of the battle for each terrain feature that you've planted explosives on. All right, and then finally, we have, what is this one? Psychic Imprint. And Psychic Imprint is a psychic one here, and it's scored 2 victory points at the end of the battle. At the end of the battle round, if one or more units from your army successfully completed the following psychic action. Psychic imprint, warp charge 4. One psychic character from your army can attempt to do this action if it's within 3 inches, right? Yeah, 3 inches of a terrain feature in your opponent's territory that does not already been psychically scanned. So this one is probably a medium one, depending on how many terrain features your army or your opponent has brought. Like if they have a bunch of like if they only have 4 terrain features, you're only going to get 8 points out of this, even if you scan all of them. So that's probably not a good choice. But if they have like a lot of terrain features, I could see this one being pretty viable, especially if you have a lot of different psyker units. All right. So you've got a mission scoring sheet. You've got a diagram of what battle ready looks like. Man, they really like Reavers in these. There's 2 pictures of Reavers on there.
And give them great rules, so they ought to promote them somehow.
Oh, that's the joke, right? And then we're going to move forward to the Strike Force missions because these ones are important. Now, first of all, reading through all these missions, they do seem pretty fun. Like I'm pretty hype on these missions. But we'll kind of go over these with a little bit more depth. So again, like you're going to get the same features that you would see in a normal like GT pack mission with additional secondary objectives and then some mission special rules as well, which are pretty fun. All right. So the first one here is the Protect the Nerve Center. So you can see it's a 5 objective mission. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, one in the middle there. And it's got the Vanguard deployment, which everybody loves, right?
Favorite.
It's the best. And so for this one, you can see these little yellow nodes here. Looks like there are 4 of them. Each one of those is a terrain node, so you're going to have to put a piece of terrain there first. But each player only has 2 objectives or 2 terrain markers that they have to put in their own deployment zone. Otherwise, they'll be able to choose how they want to put their pieces of terrain. And so the optional secondary for this one is operational headquarters. Did I say operational secondary? It's optional secondary. Yeah,
and it's also operational technically by definition in the name.
That's true.
Yeah. You're welcome.
If you select this objective, then before the battle, you must identify 1 area terrain feature from your army that has the highest terrain points cost and declare this to your opponent. Score 2 victory points at the end of the battle round if you control it. In addition, score 5 victory points at the end of the battle round if you control that terrain. If you control... Oh, hold on a second. Oh, at the end of the battle if you control it as well. So if you control it all 5 turns and at the end of the game, you'll get full 15. And it won't be scored the first battle round. So you'll get it 2, 4. So you get second round 2, third round 4, fourth round 6, fifth round 8.
Max. You at that point, right? Yeah.
Well, you get 8, and then you'll get 5. So you can get 13 out of this one, not 15. So I think that one's pretty decent. I mean, that's pretty easy to do. I think that seems like an auto one that a lot of people will take just because it's pretty easy to hold on to a piece of terrain in your own deployment zone. Then you have this one. I actually quite like the deployment zone on. So all the objectives are in no man's land. They're all outside of deployment. So it's going to be pretty difficult to kind of push those. But the nice thing about this is there's only 2 terrain nodes per deployment zone. Mm-hmm. So you should be able to shelter a couple of these objectives behind terrain. But if you do that, then your army is not necessarily going to be in a great place either, because you might not have a place to hide your whole army in, right?
Right.
So that's a little tricky. And this one is hold 2, hold 3, hold more than your opponent for primary because it's got Dominion. And then its secondary is offensive push. Score 3 victory points at the end of a battle round if you control more objective markers in your opponent's territory than you control in your own territory. So it really wants you to push into your opponent's deployment zone.
I really like some of these new mission designs where it's really obvious what they're trying to get you to do.
Absolutely, yeah.
And this one here is like, get the hell into the other side of the table.
Right. And don't just camp on your own objective markers. All right, mission 3 is Take the High Ground. So this one is a 5 objective mission, and it's a hold 1, hold 2, hold more, because it's got take and hold. And then you can see here, it only has 1 terrain node in your deployment zone or your territory. So, and there's 3 objectives on the line. So you're going to want to kind of, I think, deploy your your terrain pieces a little bit aggressively in this one, or I mean, depending on what your army is, you may want to push them back so that those terrain pieces are kind of in the open. Because you could put like an obscuring wall or something like that in front of these different pieces, these different objective markers, and then you could score them from behind the wall.
Right.
Because you could put it almost up to the line. Anyway, so the mission secondary is the high ground. Score 4 victory points at the end of the battle round if you control the tallest terrain feature in your territory and the tallest terrain feature in your opponent's territory. The height of the terrain feature is measured from the highest point on that terrain feature. And if 2 or more terrain features in the territory are tied for tallest, then you achieve so you control it. You get the secondary if you control any of them.
Can I just say that is now my favorite mission of anything?
I'm going to put a flag on the top of mine. I mean, that's strictly prohibited. You shouldn't do that. Because again, these
no wobbly model, but the highest point of the building is the top of the flag. Good luck.
So that one's kind of cool. That one is you can actually score full points on.
Yeah.
If you're good at the game. So, but nobody is probably that good. All right, mission 4, aggressive strike. So this one's a hammer and anvil. It's control 1, control 2, control more. It is a 5 objective one, but they alternate terrain node and objectives in No Man's Land, and then each territory has one objective that has a terrain node on it as well. So this one has a secondary called hard push.
Giggity.
Yep. I was just going to say, just like that morning after you've been drinking a lot, sitting on the anyway.
That LVO Sunday morning toilet.
That's a hard push, my friend. Paint that one in hangover black.
That's round 3 of the team tournament. That's a hard push.
Oh, it sure was for us, wasn't it? So hard push is an action that you can take. 1 unit from your army can start to perform this action at the start of your movement phase if it is within range of an objective marker that you control. The action is completed at the end of your turn, and you score a number of victory points depending on which objective marker you control, which objective this marker or this action was performed on. So you can see here we have like A and E. So basically, you want to try and get in the center because the center is worth. C is only worth 3. Oh, you want the ones in your opponent's deployment. It's kind of in No Man's Land. So B and D are worth the most. So they're worth 5 victory points. Oh, but it's worth different. Yeah, you want to be in your opponent's one. Sorry. It's worth different victory points for different players. So player A, like getting the one close to their deployment zone is worth less than going into your opponent's deployment zone and getting that one. Which makes sense. And it's an end of turn one, so that one's pretty useful too. All right. Mission 5, protected assets. So this one is a 4 objective game. It has control 1, control 2, control more. And then it has the vital assets progressive objective. Score 3 victory points at the end of the battle round if you control all the objective markers in your territory that are either on or within any area terrain features that are wholly within 6 or wholly within 6 of any obstacle features. So yeah, so basically you're both of you guys are kind of setting up and trying to control all of these, like all the objective markers in your territory, because each territory and each deployment zone even has 2. So that one is pretty easy, but that this one I can see kind of being a volley back and forth kind of mission where you're trying to knock your opponent off of one of their objectives so that they can't score the secondary, and so you can score control more as well. All right, and the final one, and this one is a little wacky as far as the deployment map goes. This is Deny the Foe. Also my favorite thing to do in the game is generally like being annoying to my opponent.
Danny 101 right there.
Just be a jerk to him. That's my advice.
Doesn't matter how many points I score if I stop you from scoring.
You get nothing. All right, so this is control 1, control 2, control more. There are 4 objective markers in this mission. That is correct. There are 4 objective markers in this mission. So the secondary for this is, and the terrain nodes in this one are interesting. There are 3 in each deployment zone, and they're very much far away from any objective markers. I kind of see this as almost like a good terrain setup in general for a tournament game.
Right.
So that's great. So the secondary is deny the foe. At the end of the battle round, you can score any or all of the following. Score 2 victory points if you control both objective markers in your territory. Score 3 victory points if you control one or more of the objective markers in your opponent's territory. This secondary marker cannot be scored in the first battle round. So yeah, I mean, I think you kind of want to push and try and get over there. But this kind of, I see this as kind of being like a good setup in general, because this lets you set up the terrain in a really beneficial way. You have one terrain feature deep in your deployment zone that you can kind of hide behind and kind of hide there. But also you have some that are a little bit further out that can kind of shield your advance as you kind of move up. So like turn 3, I think this game is like a game on this kind of table is really going to turn on. But yeah, looks like fun. Definitely would like to try this one for sure. So those are all of the Strike Force missions, and honestly, like all of the other rules that we haven't gone over and other reviews that we've done. So with that being said, I would kind of like to take a minute and just chat about what this means for the game. All right. And so let's talk about kind of the state of the game with this. I think this is kind of an important conversation.
Yeah, this has brought out a lot of feelings.
Yeah, a lot of people are quite upset about these. They think that this is a pretty bad way to play or whatever else. So I kind of have a response to that, and I know it's probably not the most popular opinion in the world, but I'm going to make it anyway, because that's the kind of guy I am, right?
Screw you, you giant babies.
Yeah, fuck you guys. Sorry.
It's not a popular opinion, but it's an opinion.
It is an opinion. People have been complaining quite a lot in this edition that there's no standardized terrain set rules, and I think that this is the start of supplying a way for Games Workshop to set up something like that for tournaments, for a tournament series. So I think this is an important first step. I don't think this is necessarily the be-all, end-all of that. I think that there's some work that needs to be done here in order to make this like a more balanced set. But if we have rules for terrain that detail things like where the terrain like where the terrain space is, where it goes, and we have rules because terrain doesn't have bases from Games Workshop, right? And we have rules that dictate what a terrain feature special rules are and where it's supposed to go on the table. This provides us all the basic information that we need in order to make like a real decision for tournaments to have kind of a standardized table layout for missions. Now, are these missions necessarily the best because they're so terrain focused? Probably not. But they give if you were to have terrain nodes for GTs where you could place terrain on, or the terrain had to be placed in a certain way, just kind of like how Frontline did for LVO in the top 100 tables this last year, right?
Right.
I think that is the way to go. That is the way.
Well, like what was insane for me was the people praising Frontline for standardizing terrain on the top 100 tables, adjusting terrain permission.
Correct.
And then lambasting this and just hating on terrain-based missions. Now, there's a lot of, I understand, you're already taking a large amount of things to these events.
Correct.
You don't necessarily want to. I mean, the game has changed hugely from 8th to 9th. This is another major change,
right,
to how you build your lists, what terrain nodes you're bringing, things like that. But as you said, it's a step in the right direction.
Correct. Like exactly, John. And it kind of shows like a little bit of the bias that people have towards like Games Workshop as opposed to like more independently run organizations, which is a shame because they're really trying here to make like a good product. And is this going to replace the GT Mission Pack? No, hell no. No, it's not even close. But what it does do is, again, provides that framework that tournaments need in order to do this. And if you want to play this, awesome. I think this would actually make a super fun tournament to go to. And I would love to play in that any day of the week, assuming that I'm allowed to go to tournaments.
Well, here's the thing as well. So we played mostly in 8th edition ITC.
Yes.
GW released Death from the Skies.
Oh, that was 7th edition.
Or was that 7th edition?
That was 7th edition. Yeah.
So 7th edition fatigue and even memory.
Yeah, no, it's fair.
They released Death from the Skies, right?
Yeah.
At no point did Games Workshop come around with hammers to tournaments and be like, you guys using Death from the Skies? And they're like, no, this is an awful rule set. It's just overly complicated for no reason. And then they didn't smash your planes if they weren't using it.
Right. Exactly. The
fact that these mission packs are coming out, I'm a huge fan of, because if we have a GT mission pack and now a terrain mission pack, that tells me there's going to be more than chapter approved. Which is awesome, right? I don't have to wait an entire year for missions to change, because a lot of the feedback we're getting for 9th is that they don't like the missions, or they don't like how it's played,
or the secondaries, or whatever else, right?
or whatever. So now we have 3 different publications in 3 months with 3 different mission sets, 3 different secondary sets.
Correct.
So like, this is a win-win. I mean, as you said, will it be widely adopted? No.
Probably not.
It'll make a couple of really fun tournaments. I see narrative play getting a ton of use out of this using the match play rule set. But what it does do is I start to see the bones of what 40K can be.
So this is a great rule set to start events out with. So if you want to start an event at a store that doesn't really have a lot of terrain in their inventory, this is a great way to do that, right?
Right.
Like, players are bringing their own terrain. Like, all the store has to do is provide tables. Like, that's it.
And if you have been at any new community or any new store setup, guess what happens the first few tournaments?
The terrain sucks.
Either the terrain sucks or people bring their own terrain.
Right.
This at least incentivizes you to bring terrain, or for it not to suck, or to bring these certain nodes. And it works to... Games Workshop has a very specific idea of what they want the visual of people playing Warhammer to be. And it is not unpainted models with no arms playing around shoeboxes.
Correct. And so, right, and exactly, John, that's exactly what I was going to say. So, like, this letting people bring, or like, not forcing, but like incentivizing people to bring painted terrain along with painted miniatures makes the whole experience so much more attractive. Again, especially to a store or event that's just starting out, and people walk through and they go, oh, wow, look at this. Like, painted models, painted terrain. This looks awesome. And then that gets people jazzed about the game in general. So I think it's a really smart business and marketing decision to do something like this.
And if it doesn't work in 3 more months when the next mission pack comes out,
right?
Who cares?
Yeah. We're just moving on. And so, again, like, it's not something that's required. It's not something you have to buy. I just think that this is a really great precursor showing the direction and kind of what Games Workshop can do with this rule set.
Do you know where I see this having the greatest play, and what I'm looking forward to the most with it is going to be the giant apocalypse level battles.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah.
Because this is the first book I've seen where it has deployment maps and objective layouts for that size of battle, right? Or was that in the GT pack too?
No, that's in the GT pack in the main rulebook as well.
Right. But like I said, I noticed them in this one because they have a lot of cool setups, a lot of cool missions.
And
if you're spending a whole day playing an 8,000 point game, tailor it that way. I mean, that's how it's designed. So there's play there. And like, just as a response to the sky is falling, no one is forcing you to play these missions. It's a cool rule set that has play. And if you were playing it with your group, awesome. It's well thought out. You're going to have a good time.
I think so too.
Like, Reese isn't going to bend at the knee and institute this nationwide or internationally.
One of the core tenets of the ITC is that they're letting people play events with their own rules. So,
like, literally, we could get an ITC code tomorrow for like 1,000 point friendly using our own made up missions.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, people use their own stupid made up missions all the time. I mean, look at the tournaments in the Midwest.
Yeah, for sure. There's a drum roll somewhere in here.
Yeah, sure. I know. I get you. Yeah. Anyway, so that has been our review of the Tactical Deployment Mission Pack that's coming out. That's going up for pre-order today. So if you want it, you should definitely pre-order it from Games Workshop. I can't wait to see kind of some of the rules for terrain and things like that, because I think this is going to be a really fun way for, like, John and I, especially, like, we're going to be playing some games with this for sure.
For sure.
So if you enjoyed our little review of Tactical Deployment, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check us out, our podcast. We have a podcast every 2 weeks. We also put up videos on YouTube, so you can see our podcast on YouTube as well, and see John and I's smiling faces as we talk some shit about 40K. Yeah, more or less.
And also we talk about 40K.
Yeah, sometimes. All right, thanks. Have a good one.